From the top dog Conor McGregor to the former heavyweight champion Brock Lesnar, these fighters refused to cooperate when it came to the United States Anti-Doping Agency testing. Starting with former UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones, who has tested positive for banned substances on multiple occasions. Jones has been in and out of trouble with USADA for years, but what many people find most concerning is his history of avoiding USADA testing. In 2015, he was involved in a hit-and-run accident in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which resulted in a felony charge. However, he wasn't immediately drug tested by USADA, which raised suspicions, and understandably so. It might not have raised such red flags if it was a one-time thing, but that wasn't the case. In 2018, he was again involved in a situation where he wasn't drug tested by USADA. Jones was scheduled to fight Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 232, but the event was moved from Las Vegas to California just 6 days before the fight due to an abnormality in Jones's drug test results. USADA stated that it was because of a residual amount of a banned substance from Jones's previous positive test in 2017. But the situation raised questions since everyone was shocked that Jones hadn't been tested prior to the event. This led to many fans believing that he might be getting preferential treatment. Before anyone decides on that, let's take a look at Brock Lesnar, who's yet another former UFC heavyweight champion. Lesnar returned to the UFC in 2016 for a high-profile fight against Mark Hunt at UFC 200, but he wasn't subjected to USADA testing until the week of the fight, which was very suspicious. I don't think any of us need further convincing of how seriously the UFC takes this testing. After the fight, it was revealed that Lesnar had tested positive for a banned substance, clomiphene, in both an in-competition and an out-of-competition drug test. Lesnar was subsequently suspended by USADA and was also fined by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. However, the story doesn't end there. It was later revealed that Lesnar had actually retired from MMA competition before his positive drug test was revealed. This meant that he was no longer under USADA's jurisdiction. This allowed him to avoid further punishment from USADA and to return to professional wrestling without any issues. Talk about a loophole, am I right? Speaking of those, up next is a Brazilian fighter who also managed to use his wit to evade this testing. Gleison Tibau, who has been in the UFC for over a decade, was flagged by USADA for a potential doping violation in 2015, but he managed to avoid a suspension by arguing that the banned substance in his system was from a tainted supplement. But no one seemed to believe this story. There were widespread rumors that Tibau was using performance-enhancing drugs, which is why it was even more shocking that he was able to avoid punishment. Even though it was shocking to hear a veteran fighter like him manage to get out of being tested, it didn't raise as many eyebrows as a young rising star did in the UFC's bantamweight division. Sean O'Malley has only been in the UFC for a few years, but he's already gained a large following due to his flashy fighting style and colorful personality.
Fighters we have seen it.
Big leg with the right for O'Malley. And an uppercut. Big right. Look at that desperation shot, Joe.
However, in 2020, he was pulled from a fight due to a potential doping violation. Although he was later cleared by USADA, many fans were shocked that a young fighter with so much potential was caught up in a doping scandal. O'Malley's case was an eye-opener for sure, but I think everyone knows whom the buzz was all about recently. I'm talking about the one and only Conor McGregor. The former UFC featherweight and lightweight champion has been involved in several controversies throughout his career, and one of them involves USADA testing. In 2019, McGregor was involved in an incident with a man at a pub in Dublin, Ireland. It was caught on camera and went viral. But what many people didn't know was that McGregor was supposed to be tested by USADA on that same night. However, he and his team reportedly left the pub before the USADA officials arrived, which meant that he was able to avoid being tested. Now, we don't know for sure whether McGregor was using performance-enhancing drugs at the time, but the fact that he was able able to avoid USADA testing is certainly concerning. It raises questions about the integrity of the testing program and whether some fighters are able to get away with cheating. One thing's for certain, his case sparked a great deal of concern in this area. It's none other than Lyoto Machida. He's a former UFC light heavyweight champion who has been in the sport for over 15 years. In 2016, Machida was flagged by USADA for a potential doping violation, which would have resulted in his suspension and tarnished his reputation as a top fighter in the UFC. However, he somehow managed to avoid punishment by arguing that the banned substance in his system was from a legal supplement. Many fans and critics were skeptical of Machida's explanation, and some even accused him of using performance-enhancing drugs. Others pointed out that this explanation seemed too convenient, and it was difficult to believe that a veteran fighter like him would make such a mistake. Despite the controversy, Machida was able to continue his career in the UFC and even fought for the middleweight title in 2018. You'd think I'd be done by now, but you seriously underestimate the number of potential drug violations that these fighters have racked up. Another on this list is Tim Means, a UFC welterweight who has been in the sport for over a decade. In 2017, he was pulled from a scheduled fight against Alex Oliveira at UFC 207 after USADA notified the UFC of a potential doping violation. Means had tested positive for a banned substance, ostarine. Initially, it appeared that he was facing a potential 2-year suspension from the UFC due to the violation. However, his legal team was able to successfully argue that the result was due to a contaminated supplement that he had been using. You see, the UFC anti-doping policy allows for a reduction of the standard 2-year suspension in cases where there's evidence of contamination. Means' team was able to produce evidence that the supplement he had been taking was contaminated. The USADA ultimately agreed that the violation wasn't the result of intentional use. As a result, Means was only given a 6-month suspension and was able to return to the octagon in June 2018. This next player was also able to avoid testing even though he said he wasn't trying to, and he is Yoel Romero, the former UFC middleweight contender. Romero is known for his impressive physique and explosive fighting style, but he's also been involved in several doping controversies. According to reports, Romero was scheduled to be tested by USADA in December 2019, but he left the testing pool shortly before the test was scheduled to take place. USADA officials attempted to contact Romero to schedule a test, but they were unable to reach him. As a result, Romero was flagged by the organization for a potential anti-doping policy violation, but he was later cleared of any wrongdoing. He has denied any intentional attempt to avoid testing, stating that he simply forgot to inform USADA of his whereabouts. However, many fans and analysts are skeptical of Romero's explanation, especially given the fact that he has a history of issues with USADA. In 2016, Romero was suspended for 6 months by USADA after testing positive for a banned substance. However, he was able to have his suspension reduced to just 3 months. Honestly, how he was able to evade that sentence is beyond my understanding. That's it for all the UFC fighters that avoided USADA testing.